People Rising LinkedIn Live, where I, Peter Laughter, get the awesome opportunity to speak every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to these amazing individuals about how we can transform our organizations to more humanistic cultures and have more people in our organizations enlivened and moving in the same direction. We're excited to be here as we're doing introducing the team. If you're watching, please just send a note, a comment on where you're joining from, and yes. So, Shelley, please,
Yeah,
why don't you start us off and introduce yourself?
the one person who can never get her intro down. Hi, everybody. I'm Shelly Jeffcoat. I'm really happy to be here. I'm part of this, be a part of this community. So what you probably know about me, I'm a businesswoman, an expert in branding, I'm a podcaster, I'm a mom, but most of all, I'm a part of this amazing motley crew that I'm so excited to join this week. So hello, everybody.
Hello, Shelley. You
Hello,
are
Shelly. Glad you're feeling better.
Man, it
yes.
was rough. Thank you.
Shelly had COVID last week.
I had COVID, y'all.
Well, now that you're talking about COVID, why don't you talk about something more exciting, Lenwood? Yourself. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll go next. I'm not more exciting than COVID. So my name is Linwood Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of Accelerate. We help teams work together better and faster. And I am thrilled to be a part of this community with these guys, doing our best to help all of you, right? So we can learn together, grow together, solve problems together. So thanks.
Karen, tell the world a little bit about what you're up to and who you
Yeah,
are.
hi everybody. My name is Karen Brieger. I'm in New Hampshire. I'm a chief people officer, and I'm about to embark on my next new adventure, which I'll be happy to share details of the next time we're together. But I just continue to be honored and awed to be a part of this group and really enjoy our discussions. I think what gives me the most energy is when we really just are able to talk amongst ourselves. It's nice having guests, but it's also really great just to get everyone's perspective on the different issues that we're talking about in terms of teams and advancing change within teams and how we can work together better and faster.
It is a real pleasure. It's one of the things I look forward to every week, and
me
I'm
too.
amazed at how much fun it is. Well, welcome. I'm Peter Laughter, and I'm the founder of True Bearing, where we believe or we're clear that rockstar employees are looking for meaning. And we help companies tell powerful stories about purpose and values to attract and engage with the people who matter most. And speaking of engagement, that's our theme for today. We are talking about really how employee engagement improves results and giving some strategies about how your organization can improve employee engagement. So, with that, I'd love to hear y'all's examples. And just as a note, our esteemed colleague Kim Blue will join us momentarily, and we'll pause to get an introduction from her. But until then, I'd love to hear Shelley, Lenwood, and Karen. What are times where you've experienced working in a great culture where you were engaged and your colleagues were engaged?
I'll go first. So hello, Mr. Dale Morgan. So what I definitely want to start out by saying is, I'm trying not to name drop specific organizations because I've worked in some really incredible places. But this one, if you go on my LinkedIn profile and you see where I'm currently employed, you'll see this is kind of the one that I'm referencing. I think what's made engagement successful is that it is clearly defined. There's a lot of organizations that look at engagement in terms of just the number of, I call them spicy event planning, just based on the number of events that you're trying to get people to be excited to be a part of. And then somehow that is supposed to matriculate into the culture of the organization. And it isn't. It really is being really thoughtful about how employees are tapped into the organization, regardless of where they are in terms of the function globally, and how long they've been with the organization. And even engagement for me, I think about, what are you hoping to achieve from this engagement? What does that look like? And then tying it back to the employee experience. What does it feel like when we say that our employees are highly engaged? So I think one of the practices that I really appreciate is when organizations are methodical about the way that they've aligned engagement back to the priorities of the business. So again, it's not a group that's separate within HR that's trying to come up with fun activities, right? Why are we gathering? So we think about, how are we connecting and how are we collaborating and how that feeds into the culture of the organization that we're all trying to foster, whether that's, being inclusive or whatever it is that it is for your organization, is really being thoughtful about what does engagement look like. And then because we're now in hybrid, is making sure that that engagement is also hybrid. There are going to be opportunities where it's a face-to-face type of engagement or virtual or mixed media. And then thinking about all of the policies and the tools that you have in place to make engagement happen, right? So again, whether it's, are there different training models? Are you managing productivity through engagement? All of those things need to be considered. So I think if you take a more holistic approach on engagement, really understanding what does that mean for the organization, what are employees supposed to experience? How are you measuring engagement? How does that align back to profits for the business, right? It's not just about, being happy at work. So all of those things are, I would say, just kicking it out the gate around engagement.
And just a note, Gartner Group did a study that companies with highly engaged employees are 20% more profitable than those with lower engagement. So it definitely does have an impact. And Shelley, as our viewers are checking out your LinkedIn profile to find out which company you work at, which you speak, do you personally experience being engaged
Yes.
there? And what is it that opens up for you?
Yeah.
By being engaged.
So the nature of my engagement is a little bit different because I'm the architect for our values and culture. So when I think about engagement for me, so I'm typically involved in many employee resource group activities and events or business events or those types of things because I am representing the organization in a different way. But tapping into that still means that when I'm showing up 100%. I'm showing up because I want to learn more about my colleagues. I want to learn more about our culture. I want to learn more about the business. Sometimes it's, attending lunch and learns where it's just talking about a specific product and it has nothing to do with, my sphere of influence, but it is an opportunity for me to build my own business acumen and be a kind of a stronger player within the organization. You can't have influence if you don't know what you're talking about. So, okay. So
I don't know about that. I've seen a lot of politicians who are highly influential.
Yes. They have no
I'm not going to say any names.
They have no idea. So that, for leaders or HR managers, or it doesn't matter where you sit, it is what is the purpose for you showing up and what do you expect to get back to experience? What are you getting out of this event or this opportunity to connect? And engagement, one of the things that I think this might be a sore point, y'all, is one of the things that I think really kicked up over post-COVID, post the vid in 2021 and at the beginning of 2022, when we saw a lot of organizations trying to find ways for employees to build culture. I'm using the air quotes because this is not how you build culture, okay? But they were trying to come up with these creative ways of trying to, well, hello, Amari, trying to figure out ways to tap into engaging and without defining again, what is it we're trying to achieve, or mapping engagement back to your ESG or your governance, right? So mapping it in that way back to the business. So this is, I think, is why it's really important to really be considerate. So if you're an HR partner or leader, or if you're in D&I, if you're a hiring manager or not a hiring manager, if you're an employee resource group, anyone who has anything to do with planning out engaging events or engaging opportunities, for your employees. Really, really think about what it is that you're expecting to get out of the result from the not just from the employee perspective, but also for the business.
Excellent. I want to hear that same question from Lenwood, but first, Kim, welcome. Good to see you. Introduce yourself and let the world know who you are and what magical things you're up to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kim Blue. I am the leader owner of K Blue Consulting. I am also a fractional HR executive, similar to my esteemed colleague Karen. I'm a chief people officer. And so I help leaders and organizations think about how they want to get to their yes, or we try to find solutions, when it is a no, or understand why it is a no, and really just help them, thrive on their employee experience every day. And redefining what HR is, right? It's been the same thing for so long. And so how do we now kind of embrace HR as that partner that we know that they can be when we talk about having that seat at the table? And so that is what I do by dangling my own shingle out there and the things that I'm passionate about. And happy to be among you all today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and before we hear from Lenwood, I think I was speaking at a conference yesterday, and it was really startling to the extent to which CEOs and senior leadership of organizations are recognizing that something needs to shift in how they interact with HR. So I think it's just it's exciting time, for all of us to be having this conversation.
We'll take it.
So Lenwood, tell us about the organizations that you've worked with that you've experienced the most engagement and what was possible as a result.
Sure. I will, before I get into that, I wanted to just share that, one of the, I can't think of his name. Never mind. I should try to grab the book before. He's an expert in digital transformation. And 10 years ago, when he put out his framework for digital transformation, employee experience wasn't even in the framework.
Wow.
Maybe I
That's
should.
startling.
Maybe I should try to grab it. That's kind of remarkable that employee experience. So this year, or actually it was last year, as a 10-year anniversary of his book, and he's at MIT, I think. Anyway, he had updated the framework and included employee experience and was like, oh, it turns out this is a really important part of digital transformation. I was like, oh boy, okay. But anyway, I actually haven't worked at that many organizations, all right? Compared to, I see folks with 13, 14, 15 experiences on their resume, which is, I don't say that in a way that is meant to be negative. That is very common. And I think that trend will increase, that people will be at organizations for, 2 years, 3 years. That'd be very, very common. And there's a generation of people coming up that see that as the way to go, right? So you go to an organization, you get 2 or 3 years experience and you're out so that you can go get some other experience and then do what you really want. I mean, there's a lot of kids out there. I shouldn't say kids, a lot of young adults, people who are new in their careers or early in their careers. That's how they're thinking. So I think I worked at maybe 5 or 6 organizations, which is not very many at all. The place that I worked where I would say let me just step back and say, for half of my career, I worked in a private law firm. Okay, engagement is billable hours. Like that's how you're engaged when you're at your desk, billing hours. Okay, otherwise they don't want to. So it's kind of a different animal. All right. So, but when I was not in a law firm, right, I worked for a founder CEO. And I
like those
found,
guys.
yeah, I found that to be certainly the most inspiring place that I worked. Okay. And so to the extent that I bought in to the purpose and mission of the business, that is what propelled me forward. I really believed in what the organization was doing. Now, that leader had some things that were great about his style and how he did things, and he had some things that were not so great. And so it was a great learning experience for me in that regard. And I would say that was the environment where I was most founder. I like that. I like an entrepreneurial environment. And I also I like the being in that kind of a mission driven organization.
Yeah, that's a really interesting example, Linwood, is the introduction of purpose and values as a tool to create and coalesce around and to create engagement. And I think it's also really fascinating. I think a lot of professional services, they think that their product is billable hours. No, it is an experience that their clients have, and they are drawn to it because they have certain commitments in life. But focusing on that billable hours, one, detracts from their profitability because they're focused on the billable hours as opposed to the reason behind where the company has been created. And you didn't feel engaged by it. It was just time to make the donuts, which is
Well, I mean, I would say, and I hear what you're saying, Peter. I'm not going to really disagree. I'm just going to say that I think times have changed. Right. So when I was first a junior associate in a law firm, actually the first law firm that I worked for, not every partner even had a computer. Okay, now that's not that long ago, folks. All right. It's just that things have really changed in a relatively short period of time. So, when I was a junior associate, associates were, we were in the back, like we were just grinding it out. Like we had to crank out documents and prepare for closings and do all of that kind of stuff. We weren't engaging with client. I mean, none of that was in our sphere of what we should be focused on. And if we got focused on that, we would get a little pushback. But like I said, it was a different time. Times have changed from the expectations of younger workers, and times have changed in terms of client accessibility and the type of experience that the client can receive.
Now, just to throw this out there, because I hear this a lot from particularly law firms and accounting firms, where you just talk about it's grinding work, and and I don't know, I don't know if you all have seen that video about the Pike's Market, fish market, where I mean these are people who are dealing with dead, slimy, smelly animals, and they are having a blast. So I mean, now I'm dyslexic and I have ADD, so I could never be a lawyer. But if those guys can have fun with selling slimy, dead, smelly sea animals, then how hard can it be? Is that you can have excitement and engagement about that? I mean, if you gave me a choice, fish, lawyering, I think I'd go with lawyering. So
well, my short response to that is as you move up in the, it's basically just a ladder. When you start on the bottom rung, you're the first level of year associate. You don't know anything. You can't really provide very much value, although you think you think you can do a whole lot that you really can't. All right. So that like important. But as you move up, and the things that you're doing, your change, then you can start to do some of the things that will be engaging and interesting to you. I mean, and again, I'll say it depends on the type of lawyer you are. I was a deal lawyer. So when you're a deal lawyer and you are a junior deal lawyer, you're doing due diligence. You're, traveling around, and your best friend is boxes. So, but like I said, that was a long time ago. Things have changed. Just as an example, most deal rooms now, deal rooms aren't actual physical rooms anymore. The documents are loaded onto a computer. So,
I would, I might express things a little in contrast to Lenwood. Early on in my career, I worked in public accounting. I was certainly not an accountant or a tax person. I was in HR even back then. The world revolved around the billable hour. I too was billable, and I just had I had the fortune, I suppose, of being the lowest billable hour person in the firm. And as a result, even in HR, spent tax season photocopying, collating, and stapling partnership returns. But there was a level of engagement, even for the lowest level staff accountant. The firm had an ability to help engage, and there was camaraderie among those first years. You don't know what you don't know. And yeah, you're low man and you get all the grunt work, but there's camaraderie in that with your peers. And the firm that I worked with, although not a lawyer, it's a similar environment, I think, to law firms. It can be done. And yes, things were different back then, but I think, whether you're a customer facing person or any other sort of organization, engagement is possible. It has to be thoughtful, and there has to be a commitment. And if you walk into it thinking, well, I'm just, it's just a billable world, and, I'm just doing grunt work, and maybe when I get to a more senior level and I climb up the ladder and move out of this associate role, you're dead from the start, if that's the thinking and if that's the way the partners are approaching things. So whether it's a CEO or whether it's a group of partners, I think there has to start with a mindset when it comes to engagement, having been in that sort of environment myself.
So how do you define engagement?
I love that.
That's
there you go, Kim.
Like, how do you define engagement in I'm gonna just put all the pleasantries aside because we've been doing this a few weeks now, and so I don't need to get with that at this point anymore. What is it that we're saying we all need to be doing, whether you're the CEO or whether you clean the building or whether you are the person who's providing some type of partnership, right? Like, how are we defining engagement? Is it the same way we define mission, vision, and values? Are we bringing those things back into the conversation? Like, how does that engagement remain consistent, and who owns keeping that as a part of the conversation, right? Remember when diversity was something we talked about and then it all of a sudden became a core value? Is engagement the same thing, right? That's the question that I'm posing. Who owns keeping that as a part of the conversation? Everyone. And how do we make sure that it is consistently a part of the things that we do? Because everybody feels how they feel about it, and depending on the day or what's happening outside in your life, especially now that life and work integration is so close, how do we keep people there?
Everyone owns it.
I want to hear from everybody, but first let's hear from Kim answer that question for herself. I want to.
Yeah, I mean, I own my own engagement. I definitely do. And especially now being a solopreneur and going in, right? I bring what I want people to experience of me to the table, to the conversation. So the founders and CEOs that I work with, the companies that I'm doing some coaching alongside. I believe part of what makes K Blue Consulting so valuable is that they're going to experience me bringing in the thing, right? It's like right? It's like elements, right? There's this element and there's this element. Engagement is the bond between those two things, right? There's no hydrogen and oxygen, or there's no water without something making that stick, right? And so engagement, in my perspective, is that bond that helps those things stay connected and remain together. And so for me, I recognize myself. If you're bringing Kim in, or if you're asking for the things that I provide, I am that bond agent that is there to be able to provide it. So I always come into the conversation or into the environment bringing that. It comes through listening, and it comes through observation for sure, and discovery, and all the things we know come with that. But I definitely own it myself, and then I make it a part of all of the conversations, right? And I'll say, this is something we should be excited about, and the next time we're together, I want to hear what that looks like, or what you all have been doing with this between the time that we end our conversation today and the next time we get together. But I don't know that everybody thinks like that, which is why I posed the question, right? Who owns it, and how do we and how do we define what it is for organizations? Or as we talk about being a people rising community, how are we defining it so we can help others attach to it and be that bonding agent?
Karen, you said it's owned by everybody. Speak more about that.
Yeah, so I think, and it goes back to the question, Peter. Peter, the question that you first asked us. I spent some time with an organization that I for a period of time had what I would define as a great culture with a high level of engagement. But no, we didn't have metrics that we measured it. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about it and overthinking it. We focused on values, and making the connection for employees to those values. And so, yes, I know people ops teams have to have metrics and KPIs to manage, and there's expectations. We weren't an organization that had a lot of that, but because I think what happens is everyone gets hung up on how we're going to measure it, and they talk and talk and talk and talk about it, and then there is an action, or they're focused on the wrong things. And so going back, it's focused around values, which is what we talked about with transitional change, right? So see how this is all starting to connect. And the organization I was at that did it the best, we were very customer focused, and so the customer experience was critical. And we all had a responsibility to step outside of our internally focused view and look from the outside in, and what truly was the experience the customer was having with all departments at all levels of the organization. And we carried that through to the employee experience. What was the experience from start to finish, from the recruiting process all the way through offboarding, if and when that came? What was their experience? And putting as much detailed focus on it as we did with the customer. And if you and our core values were focused around that customer delight and that employee experience. And one of the key values we had was working with and for each other. And every single person in that company, they didn't know any of the other core values for the most part, but they always, if you stopped anyone in the hall, that was the one that they could tell you. And we tested it too, right? And working with and for each other. And then we would say, what does that mean to you? And it was similar to everybody, but it was about the connection of team, and it was about working cross-functionally, and it was about working to support the value that the company had put out there of customer delight. That's what drove the engagement of our employees. That's what gave people the purpose. And I want to do a good job because Kim's depending on me, and Shelly's depending on me, and Lenwood's depending on me. And I'll also let the customer down. And we also made sure that every single one of those employees knew who the customer was. And Kim, you weren't my customer. No offense. If we were coworkers, the customers, and we define this, they were the people that paid us money, or who were prospective customers who we hoped would pay money. You were a cog in the wheel that we needed to work together to support that customer, but there was none of this internal customer stuff, because that's another pet peeve of mine. As an HR person, the sales team might be, a team that I have to work with to support, and we have to function well together, but they're not my customer. I'm not a customer of theirs. Nobody's paying each other money for that, right? So it was around that value, and it was around also making connection that I may be in human resources, but what's the connection I have to the customer? If I never talk to a customer and never email with a customer, I still have a connection to supporting that customer, and making sure that whether it was HR or it was the accounting person or it was the janitor, every single person somehow connected back to customer delight. And so another way we worked to drive employee engagement was making sure, regardless of what your role was, you could articulate and you understood how you connected back to that customer experience. So to me, and I know that others probably have a differing opinion on this. I think when organizations get so hung up, how are we going to measure? How are we going to track? How are we going to this? How are we going to that? It gets lost. And one of the people joining us today said companies can only build an engaged culture when it starts with sincere, inspirational leaders at the top. That's part of it, but it's also the bottom, right? It has to come from all levels, which is why I say everyone owns it. And yeah, I'm responsible for how I feel every day at work. And am I coming in with a great attitude? Am I motivated or engaged? But we all own it. When I say everyone owns it, I mean everyone has to have that connection to the company purpose, the company values. Do you know who the customer is? What are you doing each and every day that drives that customer success? How are you working cross-functionally with your peers to do it? And again, back to transformational change, right? It's about rallying around a core value and working with those proponents that are already on board with you, because you'll start to bring people along rather than focusing on probably the minority of people that are like, because those are the ones that are the loudest, but those tend to be the ones we pay the most attention to, and we shouldn't be.
I love all of this. I feel like we have now 4 people confirming what I've been saying for years, and I'm so excited. This is crazy. So one of the things that I wanted to share back to a question that Kim had about how we're defining engagement. So through the lens of values and culture. And so this organization that I'm at is about 10,000 employees, but under that umbrella, there's 7 individual brands, which means there's 7 individual employee value props. So it's not just like one, okay? So it's very complex. But one of the ways that I consider employee engagement is broken out in kind of 3 different spheres. So the first sphere is around connection and culture. So the way that we're connecting into the culture, and that could be, making sure that we have events that are inclusive to different cultures. We have diversity inclusion days, for example. We have specific events that are charted around getting employees physically tied into the business through that lens. The second way through engagement is how we collaborating. So now we're talking about the lens of how we're working across the various functions, across the various brands, how are we managing internal mobility. That is actually a part of engagement, because you want people engaged into the process of making some of these decisions, learning the business, and then, from a retention perspective, keeping that talent. And then the last C, and the biggest C for me, is community. And community is where, so for a lot of you guys who are in the chat, maybe at your company or maybe as a leader, you're leaning into, again, I mentioned ESG at the top, so around governance. But what are some of the things as a corporate citizen that you're doing as an organization? And then, your employees are motivated to support those things. So whether it's, we have some things called cares days, or your volunteering services, but again, you're taking that into the community, and you're building out the community. And that's a way for your employees to also not just engage the community, but also have your clients engaging in the community in that way. So that's why I say, and by the way, all of these things, all of these C's that I mentioned are all tied under our values. We have actually 10 individual values, but we kind of lean to like 2 or 3 for the most part. But because it's a part of a strategy, though, we can stand back and say, as I'm thinking about what our engagement strategy is for 2023, we're going to support these values doing these 4 things, and this is where the teams are going to go. As an employee, this is what it feels like. This is the experience. So when you do X, you get Y. Right. And then we hold ourselves accountable. That's the other thing about engagement. You have to hold yourself accountable as an organization, and to say, okay, it's not just about like how many people showed up to an event, but did it improve my job? Did I learn something new? Did it help drive the business forward? Have we shaped the environment, the organization in any positive way. And by the way, do we want to repeat this behavior, or there's some things that we need to let go of? So all of that. And then Kim, about storytelling. Storytelling is, I totally agree about how we tell engaging stories. And I'm not a fan of, there are corporate social media storytelling that we have to do. Corporate comm folks know what I'm talking about, internal and external, right? But there's also there's also the opportunity for organizations to enable their employees to support employee advocacy and tell their own stories. It's much more credible for someone who is working in the organization to talk about how great it was to go and pitch in an hour to support X. And boy, this is a great place to be, and be authentic. And they're genuine about that level of engagement, right? Versus churning out beautiful looking ads and stories from a corporate perspective, where we're trying to convince people to buy into what we're selling. So the fact that, go ahead.
Sorry, so we had actually a comment about that. So
Yeah.
someone said, my 2 cents is that companies can only build engaged culture when it starts with sincere, inspirational leadership at the top.
Yes.
There we go. Thank you.
And sincere is the key, because it's not a photo op. So, and I confess, I'm at a lot of photo ops, but I'm telling you that people can read through the photo op and tell if you're genuinely supporting what it is that you're showing up for. So if you're a leader and you're showing up just for a photo op, that is not going to land well, 10 minutes past the photo op happens, because people are going to know that, right, you've showed up for a photo op, but you're not the same leader when I'm in the hallway with you. That's engagement, by the way, when we're in the hallway and you won't even say hello. That's a part of your engagement.
That's a really great point that you made, Shelley. And it was something that stood out to me that really surprised me in that founder-led company. The founder CEO walked around, he was around the building all the time. You could see him, and he would just thank people. He would thank that, you did your job, your piece. He always thanked you for your piece. Whatever your piece was, you got to thank you. And it was that is the kind of thing that will cause people to go above and beyond, because they feel their piece is valued, whatever that piece is.
That's powerful.
Yeah, so what are examples, Karen and Kim, that you remember of authentic, engaged cultures, and what are stories that emerged from those things for yourself?
So I'll jump in. So I think I may have sort of unique stories, so to speak, because the companies that I worked for had unique cultures, right? So for those, if you've looked at my LinkedIn profile, I can say this because we're streaming on LinkedIn. Many of you know that I worked for ESPN. And so that is an organization rooted in sports. That was our brand, even though it was, television production and it was storytelling on the grandest of levels, because it was the behind the scenes, right? We see these athletes perform and we see them give their life and their time and their bodies to this thing that they love. And then there's a whole story going on about them behind the scenes. And so being able to do that, but in between Sports Center and Baseball Tonight and Outside the Lines and whatever live broadcasts was taking place, there was intentional opportunities to engage, and the organization made it really clear. When I first started my career at ESPN, I worked in the wellness facility. So I was a wellness specialist. So I built relationships through exercise and through nutrition and through education, so that by the time I transitioned into HR, a lot of those things were there. But what I saw being a part of the wellness team was that we leaned into inclusive activities. So we would have these massive events. Like at the time, they would do multicultural fairs so that we could celebrate every single culture of the different type of person that worked at ESPN, because one of ESPN's core values and part of our mission statement was that fans were also internals. Just because you worked here didn't mean that you weren't a fan of something. And so we made that connection. If you're a sports fan, that's great. If you're not a sports fan, that's okay, but bring your talent here because you can still be a fan of what it is that you want to do. So that correlation was there and that celebration was a part of it. And so there was a lot of engagement around representation. It was very much representation matters before that became a phrase that we saw or that we heard regularly. And so ESPN used the very thing that it was responsible for to bring people together. And so there was food and there was music and there were opportunities to interact with people. And those were moments that people would talk about. I mean, they would film commercials right in the very same places where people worked, right? You watch those This Is Sports Center commercials, you think that that's a studio.
I remember that.
Those are not studios. I can tell you firsthand that those are right around the corner where they're doing that. Those are cubicles where people are working and sitting, and it would be a normal part of day, but people were engaged. And it was nothing to get up and go watch that or to be tapped on the shoulder to say, can you come down and be an extra in this, in this commercial shoot? We need some extra people. Or, hey, can we shoot in the gym today? And the gym team is going to be around, right? So the engagement was whatever we do is going to be a part of our environment. And if you're in that environment, you're subject to being a part of that. So they did that well. I also had the pleasure of working for Microsoft. Microsoft did that extremely well. Every single building on Microsoft's campus was curated so that you could go into a room with people. You could have access to the resources and the materials that you needed. And if you were on your part of campus and you went to another part of campus, you could get that same experience. And so they embraced things like consistency and replication so that you could be comfortable to work anywhere. They embraced these massive things like Microsoft Build, if you're familiar with that, where people just go off and then do that. But they had everything they needed there, and it didn't disrupt anything else that was going on there. And so I think it was really about saying, how do we create environments where people can produce their best work at the highest level as their most authentic self? And it was literally embracing what it is that we do well and then amplifying that. And in both of my experience there, and I was an HR business partner at both of those organizations, I never felt like I was just HR. My clients that I supported were very much like, come sit with us, come be a part of this, come, see this for ourselves. Anytime I wanted to go into a control room, I could get into a control room and watch the behind the scenes. Anytime I wanted to go and look at the engineers build something, I could sit with them and watch them code if I wanted to. So it was really about that, but I also leaned in and showed interest. I couldn't separate myself, right? And I think that's a big piece of it.
Bringing the values in the structure of the organization. Absolutely. How about for you, Karen? I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, your lips move, but I can't hear what you say.
I kind of like what Kim's just talking about leaning in and showing the interest, right? I've always been one of those folks to walk the floor. Whether it's in a manufacturing environment I've worked in or office and software, walking the floor, and not just to be visible, but and I don't want to use the word engage over and over again.
Yeah,
but to speak
I don't even know what engage means anymore. It was used so many times.
Hey, did your daughter get into Princeton? I remember last time we talked, she applied. So showing interest in what they're coding or what's going on in the production room, but also in who they are as people.
You have to
and not just HR, but for all particularly frontline leaders, more so than anybody, because remember, when we've talked about this before, the influence that the frontline leader has across the organization. So walking the floor in manufacturing environments, I have gone into a little bit, and this dates me when I say it, Lucy in the Chocolate Factory. I have worked on the manufacturing floor doing kit packing for epidural kits, and they slow the conveyor belt down when Karen comes up. But it was fun, and it was a great way to get to know people and to understand the work they're doing, and to work those overtime shifts when overtime was required, because it showed that sincere interest and that commitment, and go, oh yeah, see, we told you it wasn't, you think it's such an easy job. Well, it isn't an easy job. Well, you know what? I tell you, manufacturing is not an easy job. It's physically demanding, even if you're just standing there kit packing. But being that sort of leader, manager that walks the floor and knows the people and knows them by name and their kid, and oh, you adopted a dog. Tell me about that. But also, you know, I think I talked about this here in terms of, maybe someplace else, mental health, right? I had an opportunity to go through a mental health first aid certification program, which gave me a different perspective on things to look out for that help people in terms of the mental health space, but also just being good citizens with each other, whether it's in the workplace or outside of the workplace, things to pick up on. And, you know, maybe Peter, you show up to this LinkedIn live every week with a smile on your face. And this week, maybe you don't seem as happy and outgoing as you usually do. And after the fact, following up and saying, hey, Peter, you just seemed off today. Is everything okay? So bringing that sort of caring and concern to the workforce too. I mean, those are some of the ways I've personally done it. I've helped coach other managers and leaders to do that. It doesn't take a lot of training. It doesn't, it takes time. It takes a conscious commitment to time to get up from your desk, because we can always say we're too busy. But too busy doing what? Too busy responding to the 7,000 emails that you got that'll be there tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Are you too busy to really commit to your employees? And if you are, then no, you're not going to create the engagement you're looking to. And maybe this isn't where you should be.
Well,
Yeah, and just to recap real quick, so I think, so we're seeing the importance of purpose. We're seeing the importance of that connection throughout the organization to those purpose and values. We're seeing the importance of storytelling and weaving that purpose into the structure of the organization and connection with people as in really critical ingredients. Do you have something that you want to add to that? I just wanted to do a quick recap.
I wanted to add really quickly to the
I want to hear
point
from Lenwood. I just
Oh,
cut him
Lenwood,
off. I
okay,
want to
go
make
ahead.
sure he has a
no,
chance.
I was just going to say, I mean, this all sounds great, but I don't think that it's happening in most organizations.
Yeah.
That, because that's what all the statistics are showing. The statistics are showing that employee engagement most people are disengaged.
78% are
Yeah.
are from the spectrum of somewhat disengaged to totally checked out. So you're right.
So that's, that's kind of where I'm like, I don't know about a lot of this stuff, because I'm trying to understand how we get to a place where much less than 78%, that number is not so high.
So I think personally, and I'd like to hear your responses, but if we look at the themes that came out of in the last 3 years, Great Resignation, the quiet quitting, is agency and meaning, right? That's what people were looking for. And so we have a lot of organizations who haven't defined their purpose, right? They have a culture, right? But they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to identify it. They don't know how to define it. Yeah, and they don't know how to strengthen it, because they can't speak directly to what it is, and two, we have this hierarchical structure where the people on the top are completely disconnected with the people on the bottom. So none of this walking around and getting to know people. It's just managing by edict, and so people aren't getting the agency that they're looking for. But more importantly, the folks at the top aren't getting the memo when things aren't working. And I think that has a huge impact, to those things, and why people aren't experiencing it. And two, I think we just have a very, we view people as product. I mean, what was it that administration in the Labor Department, someone in the Labor Department referred to America as great human capital stock. I was just like, no, we're not cattle, we're people. But we have this mentality that people are products, just cogs in the machine that need to be just a little oil every once in a while, and they'll keep going. Yeah, but it's not who we are. And the world is too complex. So yeah. So what are things that organizations where the majority of people are working, where people are disengaged, can do to impact that?
I think it starts
And let's do a lightning round, like 3 things. Starting.
It starts with what Kim mentioned at the top, which is basically defining what engagement means, because it is different with different organizations. So you actually need to take the time to understand, what does employee engagement look like? And I hate to say it, you do have to figure out a way to measure it. Otherwise, how do you know if you've achieved it? And another thing is there an acceptable loss? I'm so sorry, ERG leaders, but I'm going to say this. Just because you have a lot of people showing up to events does not mean you're actually engaged. I can be engaged sitting on an event call all day long, but it doesn't mean I'm bought into the purpose.
Do events create engagement? I mean,
right.
I mean, I'm like trying to understand, like, is that going to even create the connection?
That's right. It has to be meaningful, and it goes back to the purpose. And that's where it's like, so there it is. You have to define it. It has to be aligned to purpose, and then you got to communicate it. Internal partnerships are important, so that it's not an HR initiative outside of what other groups might be doing within the organization. So those internal partnerships are important. Get your employees buy-in. If you're not in a position where you can walk the floor, you can use a pulse survey. So there's no reason why leaders aren't hearing or using listening strategies to hear how they can make those improvements. But there are going to be employees who are just, look, I just want to go and do my job. I don't want to be involved in all this other stuff. I don't have time for it. I want to do my job. I want to clock out, and I want to go live my best life. And so that's what I talk about when I say acceptable loss. You have to accept that there are going to be those situations, and if that's what's working for your employees based on what they're saying through your EOS or NPS scores, then maybe that is the loss.
So, Karen, what are your top 3 things that companies can do to, particularly those who are less engaged, need to bring into the table to start having better engagement and better experiences for everybody?
I think it starts with talking to their employees. This isn't a top-down effort. This isn't the CEO or the CHRO coming in and saying, this is what we're going to do today for employee engagement, and then pushing that down through the organization. It's not activity planning. I mean, yeah, you can do the summer barbecues and stuff. That's fun for a hot minute. Or to Shelley's point, somebody doesn't want to go. They've got other commitments. Maybe they're a caregiver for children or for parents even, right? It starts with talking to employees. How do you feel today? How are you feeling about the work you're doing? What do you want to be doing? What's important to you? And sometimes doing it in groups, and often doing it one-on-one, and then taking that data and starting to put actions in place tied around the feedback. But if it starts, yes, and again, we've referenced this comment more than once about the inspirational leaders at the top. That's a part of it. But really understanding, because what's important to me, what keeps me engaged and motivated every day at work, is different than probably what motivates you or Kim or any of the rest of us, right? And so we've got to ask, truly listen, hear, and then put actions in place based on the feedback.
Truly listen. That's important. And I think, but though, that's one of the things why it's important to define purpose and values and be thoughtful about it, because we recruit based on skills, but really what allows for great productivity is a match for the culture. So we need to start recruiting from that place so that we are all more connected to that personal purpose and values, rather than having to do the work of getting people connected to that, which I think is important.
Right. Well, and hopefully we're not just recruiting for skills, because then there's a lot of misalignment when we do that.
Yep.
Just because somebody can do the job because they have the skills doesn't mean they will do it well in our environment, and be effective and be happy.
Yep, you and I both know that, but the 78% of people who are disengaged probably weren't hired with those things in mind.
Or they may not. It may not be that they weren't hired with those things in mind. There's a huge group of people out there that were like me, that I didn't even know. Okay, I don't want to go on a huge thing, but I shouldn't have been a lawyer. I mean, it was very valuable learning for me. But my mom wanted me to go to law school. I wanted to do something else. And so I went to law school. And there are a huge number of people out there who are in jobs that they don't want to be in. They're doing stuff they don't want to do. And so, that's a big issue. That's a huge issue. So, understanding yourself and understanding the activities that will make you come alive are important. For some people, administrative activities, they love it. They love it. I mean, that's their passion, is helping someone else to get their act together. You know what I'm saying? That's like an EA person, right? And I'm like the person who is like, hey, what's going on? It's my admin is like terrible. It's terrible. Like me and someone who loves admin, we're a match made in heaven, because admin is drudgery to me. So there are components of this that are so critically important, because Kim said it, somebody said, engagement for one person is going to be different than for someone else. And so the organization can help to align the activities so that you're not doing something that is just fundamentally, not happy. It sends you to your sad place every day. So
a lot of people in their sad place.
It's a complicated issue, but it's also not a complicated issue. There are many, there's so many pieces that I think values and purpose, that's part of it. Helping people, what I call personal. If you've seen on my timeline, I have this thing where I talk about personal development, personal productivity, like helping people. Has anyone been at a company that helped with personal productivity? Peter, Shelley?
No.
Okay, so you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that, and I don't want to get on the soapbox. We don't have a few more, but I think that, an expert in digital transformation put out a book and a framework on digital transformation that didn't include people.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to bring up to Stacy Collins's comment that just came up, and I think that really highlights that point is engagement. Yeah, if we don't have leadership that is committed to engagement and walking the talk, then without that critical first step, I agree, Stacy. Then it falls apart. Throughout the organization. If the folks authoring the book don't say we need to put this in, it's a problem.
I have really been struggling, and this is something that's really little, but it's important. I don't like calling. Okay, so I talk about executives and middle management, and then I'll be like rank and file. I hate it. Or employees or workers, right? So I'm trying to find something else that doesn't have what I really think it's like kind of pejorative. It's I don't like these. So anyway, I found individual contributor or individual collaborator. So I'm going to change my language because I don't even like the language that that suggests a hierarchy.
Yeah, so I'll jump in there as we round out Linwood, because ICs or individual contributors is very much a word we use to describe different levels of leadership. And I think to answer your question, Peter, the three things that around sort of amplifying engagement. One, we've got to humanize our teams and our organizations, right? It can't be this whole cog in the wheel mentality, or I'm gonna say it, Linwood, because it makes your skin crawl, rank and file, right? It can't be that. We got to humanize them. That starts with very simple gestures like using people's names, not referring to me as HR when I walk in the room, but saying Kim's going to be here to think alongside us today. The second thing we have to do is we have to celebrate our wins. We do things really well, and then we're right on to the next thing. We don't take the time to go, what do we learn from that? What do we want to repeat? And where are our opportunities to get more clear, right, about how we can improve going forward? And then the last thing is transparency. You got to open up and tell people what's going on, what's working and what's not working. Sometimes that might evoke people to be courageous. And we talked about courage last week being one of those skills that we need to speak up or offer up something different so that things can improve.
Good words to close on. So this has been another exciting episode of People Rising. Friends, thank you so much for joining us.
We won't be here
next week because people are on spring break. Not me, because my kids are in college.
Good Friday. Next Friday is Good Friday. So anyway, spring break, Good Friday. So there'll be no People Rising next week, the week after.
Awesome.
It's a good thing you said that, because I would have told us the wrong information. So thank you, Linwood. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And please continue to engage with People Rising.
Awesome.
Great job,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. Thanks, everybody in the chat.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Ooh, Sam, great question at the end. Ooh.
Yeah, we'll have to do that another time. Have a great